Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Fiber Broadband Association's Fiber for Breakfast. We're now in our 11th episode of 2026. The gold sponsor for Fiber Breakfast is Condex. Well, in Washington today, both House and Senate are in session. And yesterday, the Senate Commerce Subcommittee on Telecommunications and Media held a hearing on U.S. leadership heading into the 2027 World Radio Communications Conference, WRC 27. This afternoon, the House Energy and Commerce Communications Technology Subcommittee will hold its own hearing on WRC 27. These hearings underscore the growing congressional attention on global spectrum policy and U.S. competitiveness. While the focus is largely spectrum, U.S. wireless leadership ultimately depends on a strong, robust fiber infrastructure to underpin the next generation of wireless networks. At the Federal Communications Commission, FCC, Chairman Brendan Carr announced that the commission will vote this month on a proposal to transition away from legacy copper networks to modern high-speed infrastructure. This is a big deal. If approved at next week's open meeting, the measure will enable providers to retire aging copper networks and invest resources towards next-generation broadband networks. So every dollar that's being spent on copper was not being spent on fiber, so this is a big deal. So this is an important step forward in the Build America agenda, and we applaud Chairman Carr for his leadership. Today, the Fiber Broadband Association's public policy team is in Indianapolis for its second Fiber Policy Lab of the year. As FBA travels across the country holding our regional Fiber Connect workshops, our public policy team and our members in each state meet with state leaders to advance fiber broadband and AI infrastructure. Today in Indianapolis, we're holding a roundtable discussion with Indiana state leaders and industry stakeholders focused on key issues, including deployment barriers, meaningful adoption, state policy and funding support, and workforce development. And then if you haven't registered yet, please join us tomorrow in Indianapolis for our second Regional Fiber Connect Workshop of the year. We, again, anticipate record attendance as we'll be joined by Indiana Governor Mike Braun, as well as the new Indiana Chief Broadband Officer, Megan Miner, and other state leaders. It's going to be another amazing event, and we hope you'll be able to join us. And last Friday was the deadline for the early bird pricing for Fiber Connect 2026 in Orlando on May 17th to 20th. We are way ahead of record registration, so please register as soon as possible if you haven't done so, and secure your hotel at the Gaylord Palms in Orlando, as you're not going to want to miss the biggest fiber broadband event in the world this year. And I am so incredibly excited about our AI and Emerging Tech Summit on Wednesday, May 20th at Fiber Connect. The opening keynote is my favorite quantum physicist, Michio Kaku, so I couldn't be more excited. Well, last week on Fiber for Breakfast, our guest was my good friend, Carol Maddie, of Maddie Consulting, discussed Mission Accomplished or Mission Abandoned, Life After BEAD. Carol is among the industry's top experts on federal broadband programs, and she shared her perspective on whether BEAD will end up mission accomplished or mission abandoned. And the quick takeaway is from Carol is that the demand for bandwidth continues to grow, especially the demand for upstream capacity. So technology innovation is not going to stand still. So the yardsticks are going to keep moving and moving and moving. So if you missed last week's session, you can go to our website and watch the replay. Today on Fiber for Breakfast, our guest is Brian Washburn, the Chief Analyst for Telco B2B Solutions at Omdia, to discuss AI and network effects, where carriers win next. Brian's Chief Analyst for Omdia's Telco B2B Solutions Intelligence Service, supporting enterprise networks and wholesale. His current area of focus is fixed transport network services, managed network services, and enterprise artificial intelligence adoption and its growing traffic requirements. Brian has covered communications and network services for various publishing and research organizations for more than 30 years, and he's been with Omdia for the past 8. Welcome, Brian. And for our audience, please type in your questions to the go. With that, I'm going to turn things over to Brian to tell us a little bit about his research.
Great, Gary. Thank you so much for having me on, and thanks so much for that introduction. And also, you dangled some very interesting movements forward with copper retirement and spectrum policy that are things that I wish we could get into, but today we really need to talk about what's going on in AI in what it means for telcos in terms of supporting the enterprises and growing traffic requirements out there in the field. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide. I've only got 2 slides just to sort of pave the way a little bit for what we've been doing in our research and what it means before we'll go to a more general discussion of what's happening in the market. But just to set the stage, we've been tracking traffic on networks for many years now under other parts of Omdia. What we've been doing for the past 3 years is looking at the impact of AI on network traffic. Specifically, we're interested in what enterprise requirements are, but we're looking at the whole requirement for all traffic. And in that, we have all sorts of different breakouts based on a methodology that we could just spend the next 45 minutes talking about alone because it's quite complex. But it involves various different parts of inside the organization, enterprise surveys, conversations with operators and with enterprises. And based on that, we put together a model that's looking at where we are today, where we're going, and where the AI industry itself has lots of different definitions of what AI looks like. We have a much simpler charter here in networks, just to understand what's the requirement of what goes in and what comes out. And because of that, we have just 3 kind of pretty basic categories. Conventional traffic, the stuff that we all are using today that doesn't have any intelligence kind of inherent in the system. Then enhanced traffic, which is the great majority of what the AI experience is today in terms of overall traffic. That's new kinds of SaaS enablement, agents working in the background, ad selection that's intelligent product recommendations or recommendations for movie content, the sorts of things that we're using for intelligent filters, this sort of thing. And then finally, net new AI traffic. That is the ChatGPT, intelligent object recognition, the new kinds of applications that have come into existence because of AI. It doesn't mean that they're going to be super intelligent new ways of doing things, but it just means that AI was the enablement to create an application that's now going to generate traffic. And as we look across these different areas, we see that this net new AI traffic is a tiny sliver today. It's 1% or 2% of overall traffic, but it is growing extremely quickly. The majority of what we see is the AI pocket is a mix of existing applications that have added AI functionality, everything from consumer to enterprise applications. And then we have the bulk moving along as the slow tanker growing. That is conventional video delivery, conventional web surfing, that sort of thing. So let's go ahead to the next slide. The other piece that I want to make sure we touch on is that as AI becomes increasingly adopted, there's a different kind of performance profile that these AI applications have. Now, this is just, we only do this kind of modeling for net new AI traffic, so it's presently a tiny sliver of total traffic. But as it becomes more prominent, we will see that it will rebalance the way that operators need to think about upstream and downstream balance of networks. There are 2 main factors that we see that are going to have a large impact kind of overall volume-wise. One is the ingestion of image and video traffic for processing, and that's a lot of an extension of IoT, cognitive analytics, visual processing, upstream content that needs to be interpreted to make intelligent decisions, where the decision itself might be just a small packet of tell this controller to do X or send an alert to Y, but the upstream portion is going to be substantial. And then the second piece is a basket of what we call future media, which is all sorts of extended reality and other ways to consume video in more intelligent ways than we're doing today. And as we see this combination take hold, we do expect that there's going to be more of a rebalancing requirement to it, with let's say wireless spectrum being currently balanced to be principally downstream. It's something where we have a long runway yet, but we expect kind of going into the 2030s that it's going to start putting pressure on those limited upstream links if we continue to use or model spectrum for communications the way that we traditionally have. And that's what I've got for a preamble. Gary, I'd like to turn it back to you if there's any questions to go into some of the detail of this. And Gary, I think you're on mute.
Just try to unpack this a little bit, Brian, because I think this sounds really important. And so let me just start with your terminology. So when I see ingestion, should I really consider that consumption?
What we're looking at is upstream and downstream traffic. So what we're trying to do is differentiate between the amount of traffic we expect to be going uplink from the user into the cloud or the data center or the edge versus what's coming from the edge or data center down to the individual user.
So the net takeaway is just like what we saw from Carol last week and Open Vault in fourth quarter is upstream capacity is becoming king. That as we getting more into the AI age, we're even thinking about like precision agriculture, just digital twins of farming, being able to constantly be able to take video analytics and be able to analyze that to look at, make sure that you have crop, the right moisture and fertilizers and all that, from analyzing, basically video analytics from farms or digital twins of farms or being able to. So what we're going to see is lots and lots of upstream capacity needed for the AI future. Did I get that right?
Exactly. And the big thing that I see in there is that we've run some of the economics on upstream video for object recognition, visual processing, cognitive analytics. And it just seems like video devices are cheap to implement. They provide sort of a universal sensor experience. One can point a video camera at a warehouse shelves and use that to count inventory. You could point a video camera at a transport application and then look at not just whether there's an accident on the highway to send an alert, but also the amount of traffic, the type of traffic, and then continue to use more intelligent levels of analytics on the gathered data of what's happening on a highway. And that ends up being, you replicate that kind of across the board, that an IoT sensor can maybe detect temperature. But if you have a camera, you can use that to detect all sorts of different conditions that are happening in order to have a greater amount of intelligence on your facilities. Or it's as simple as doorbells that send an upstream picture when someone pushes that smart doorbell of, here's who's at the door.
All right, so one is upstream is going to become increasingly important going forward. The second thing that you said, and I want to make sure that I understood this correctly, is this is going to be critically important in wireless networks because with fiber, symmetric bandwidth is no problem because you have all the spectrum all on a light wave. So you have a closed network so you have no spectrum contention. You can have as much upstream and downstream bandwidth as you want. But in a wireless network, we skew those, largely have more downstreams because there's limited capacity, limited spectrum to use. So you're saying that we're going to need to rebalance and reclaim spectrum to be able to have more capacity upstream. Is that what I heard?
Potentially, yes. And that's just if we look at cameras that are needed to point and for more mobile applications, things that are more remote. But as we get down to future media experiences, we start talking about these concepts of augmented reality. And if you're bringing something in upstream from a device in order to interpret what it's seeing and then augment that with additional intelligence and information back downstream, you end up sending a lot of video going up that needs to be reinterpreted and sent back down. So you're looking at a lot of bidirectional capacity. We, in some of our modeling, are looking at 5G and saying, okay, as we get down to 2030, will 5G be sufficient in order to provide those fully immersive experiences, or is some of that going to be cut off when people want to take a device out for mobility? And that's where we're looking forward to, what's the potential of 6G in order to make sure that we have the complete experience that's available mobile as well as in the home, where you're able to offload wireless to a local fiber broadband uplink.
Yeah, that's what, the first role of wireless is get it out of the air and into the ground to the first available point. So as we get to 5G, 6G, getting it into the fiber network so that you have that capacity. So just like a bunch of questions coming in, trying to make sure they understand, this is a very seemingly simple chart, but very complex. One question is, who are the customers driving this incremental new traffic?
Yeah, well, the ones that we're most interested in, because I represent the Telco B2B Solutions part of Omdia. It's the wholesale and enterprise piece that gets me out of bed in the morning, and that is doing business with the hyperscalers, the growing interest of neoclouds to move to private networks. So this is, kind of the big backbone centralized connectivity portion of it all. And in those areas, we've talked to telcos that have told us about the requirement for hyperscalers to say, well, we want you to be able to provide us with a guarantee of 100 waves of 100 gig capacity. And then, not to be outdone, we'd heard up to 250 waves of 100 gig capacity on certain routes in order to guarantee kind of the hyperscalers' long-term runway that they want for guaranteed capacity. Yesterday evening, we were speaking with an operator that's in Asia that is looking at the give and take between, do we offer dark fiber? What does that mean for our lit capacity services? And how do we balance that out so that we're not simply giving away the store to the hyperscaler community, yet if we try to extract too much value from it, what's to keep the hyperscaler community from hiring their own construction companies and doing an end run around our backbones? So these are the sorts of things, the dynamics that can become quite complex in the centerpiece of things. And then on the enterprise side, to an extent down to branch office and remote workers, and the consumer side, there the concern is, do we have adequate capacity going from the endpoints, branch offices, remote workers, up to the aggregation points, whether that's a data center, a cloud point of entry. And so it all does become a matter of sufficient capacity, sufficient quality to meet the requirements of the kind of AI functionality we're looking to implement. And some of this stuff is going to be real ultra low latency requirements. Some of it has very high transaction delivery requirements. And all of this is telco opportunity, but also potentially dangerous if not adequately addressed to the needs of the evolving AI industry and the folks adopting AI functionality.
It kind of reminds me of 25 years ago, or I guess when Netflix went from mailing CDs to streaming. When I remember Balan Nair was the CTO of Quest at the time, and he said, I will pay for Netflix shipping to not have this traffic go over my network. And so this is kind of history repeating itself, but now it's in the upstream. Is that right?
Yeah, in part. And another piece or another way to look at this is that for the past, say, 10 to 15 years, the video boom has really fed the CAGRs of networks. And that is, video consumption by eyeballs has been such a big factor in driving network traffic. Well, there's only so many eyeballs in the world. There's only so much video, and the quality of it is only going to be X high for the requirement. So the next stage that keeps things going, we're not seeing traffic like grow to a new before unseen level. It's like AI, we expect, is picking up the slack where we start looking at machine generated video. But that, and by that I mean machines, cameras looking at video and sending it upstream for analysis. So those are our next set of eyeballs that are growing, that are continuing or picking up the growth from the current rate of growth. And so to the point there, these machine watchers are looking to send that traffic upstream in order to be analyzed. So it is an overall growth, but the direction of that growth is changing.
So, this is, like I said, a seemingly simple chart, but it's very complex. And our audience is a little confused. They say it seems to, if I look at the chart, suggests that upstream traffic is decreasing as a percentage of network traffic, but you're saying it's increasing. Can you help clarify that?
Yeah, there's a couple things going on here. And that's where I can see it gets confusing. We've superimposed a couple different things at the same time, and that is the ingestion of video and high-res image versus ingestion and distribution of video and high-res image is a different thing from the ingestion and distribution of XR and future media. So what we're seeing is that there's going to be an adjustment in video and high-res image, but that piece of it will be a less relevant piece of the overall growth puzzle once we get into the 2030s. So what it basically means is there's a series of rebalancing that's happening in this net new AI traffic category, but a lot of it presently, as we get through to 2030, is actually still a quite small piece of the overall puzzle. So there is some rebalancing that's happening outside of the scope of this. What you really want to pay attention to is the lines that go to 2030 and beyond, and that are specific for XR and future media, where you're seeing that those numbers are going up as a proportion of overall consumption. So we end up with a picture that's going to be increasingly balanced between upstream and downstream as net new traffic becomes more a total of all traffic. And yeah, I apologize that it is sort of confusing, but we wanted to extract this new growth piece and talk about it specifically, where it's fairly insignificant today as a percentage of overall traffic, but in 2030 and beyond is where the numbers really begin to matter.
All right, so some of the questions has come in about the cost of data storage for, due to the power generation grid not being able to keep pace with demand. So do we, where are we going to end up? Are we going to run into a power issue, or do we just, the operators just need to assume that's going to work its way out and they just need to provide more fiber capacity for AI?
Yeah, the power issue is more relevant to the entire AI industry. And there's an area that, in covering this over the past 3 years, I actually made some fundamental errors. And I'm happy to talk about that because at first we expected, when we started doing these numbers, that power would have to distribute. There just seemed to be no way around this. But we expected that distribution to look like edge that would end up in proximity to places where people were consuming AI. So we kind of figured, well, instead of just having, say, in the States, Washburn and Seattle and where is it, around Cedar Rapids, Iowa, I think, AWS has some huge facilities, but those main campus facilities that are kind of the 5 or 6 different kind of real large campus locations that they'd have to distribute to be close to, say, facilities in Chicago and facilities in Phoenix and facilities in here in Boston and additional in New York City. And it would sort of just follow where the population bases are. That's, of course, what we know today is not the case. Instead, the edge is an edge that's going close to the resources it needs. And the main resource is power. So instead, we're seeing these AI facilities set up close to a nuclear power plant, which has got excess capacity, close to green energy sources, where there's ways to present a better picture for how AI is going to, say, fulfill civic requirements, or more efficient cooling, or even financial incentives, that there's a particular state or municipality or agency that's saying, we want you to be close to site X, so we will help subsidize some of the costs. So the edge, per se, is not an edge close to people. It's becoming this distribution based on where the appropriate resources are for AI to operate more efficiently, or have other incentives for operating those locations.
So Brian, let's see if, in the last minute here or two, can you try to net out the adjacent AI opportunities for ISPs? So all the ISPs on the call, just so they don't end up in the Netflix situation where they're carrying tons of traffic and not getting any revenue. What is the big revenue opportunity that they should be focused on here going forward for AI?
Gary, thanks so much. That's a fantastic question. That's one of the places where the actual money is. We've divided up roughly 8 categories of operator strategy. And the majority of where we see operators going today is, if they can, they do some sort of, say, homeland sovereign story. A lot of that works well in, say, parts of Asia, parts of Latin America, where there is an interest in having a domestic AI and sovereign presence. The other 2 pieces are simply connectivity, run lots of fiber, provide lots of capacity, and be the best doing it, and provide the SLAs for it. And then the kind of third one is an extension of that and saying, okay, we're also going to dump a bunch of switches in, because you don't need to go to an AI exchange or an internet exchange in a centralized data center. Use our network as the exchange. So that is a legitimate kind of extension of the connectivity strategy. The ones that we kind of placed hopes in, but we don't see as robust yet, are areas where some telcos or ISPs also are glommed into IT services and SI specialists. A few have tried building these communities where they build to get an ecosystem of consultants and integration specialists and professional services and AI and IoT companies. And they sort of glom it together and say, look, we can do all this capability for you enterprises to help you adopt AI. We haven't seen that bear out as a popularity thing. Instead, we're seeing the carrier community go back to traditional SI partnerships, like, we'll team with Accenture, with IBM, or with PwC, Capgemini for our strategy. And then there's a couple others where there's this dabbling to say, let's try some of this, some of that, or let's take our own internal AI and expose it externally for our customers. And that's where you see Telefonica, Orange on the one hand, Verizon on another, folks like Rakuten that are trying out different strategies to see what can we augment to the network that can generate revenue. But yeah, there's lots of different approaches. Connectivity is the core, but there is an expansion strategy. No one's quite sure exactly where telcos have got permission, but we continue to explore for those monetization opportunities.
Well, Brian, I think it's clear that the world has changed So the world we once knew, I guess not too long ago, as now we're in the throes of AI, and it's accelerating at a rapid pace, and every person in the fiber ecosystem needs to be able to make sure they are adopting their strategies to be able to take advantage of this new surge of investment and opportunity. So Brian, thank you so much for all your insights and the work that you're doing at Omdia.
Gary, thanks so much for having me.
Well, I'm really excited about next week. Our guest next Wednesday is Michael O'Day, the head of Corning's optical communications division. He's going to be talking about fiber innovation, AI, and other hot topics, including fiber availability. So you're not going to want to miss that. Head of Corning here to talk about all the great things in fiber. So please join us next Wednesday. And I hope everybody has a great rest of your week. And please come to Indy. We're going to have a great time tomorrow and meeting with the governor and everybody there. So it's going to be awesome.